Today we looked at trying to understand the second half of Activity 79. So we're going to focus in on the procedure steps here. In particular, we're going to look at procedure steps 5 through 7, because I assume you could pull off 1 through 4 on your own for the most part. Again, understanding that this year we substituted, instead of my moon observations, we have substituted in this stardate page to use as our data. And we set November as our month to use. So looking back at our procedure steps, it says in the circles on student sheet 79.2 for May 11, 12, and 28, draw the shapes of the moon you predict will be visible on those days. So if we look at our calendar here, you can see we've drawn in some pictures of those today. And we talked about 3 different methods that we could use to do this. Method number 1 is looking at the patterns. So looking at the shapes that are given to us on Emily's moon observation page and trying to kind of fill in the blanks. So thinking to ourselves, if this is what it looks like on the 5th, and this is what it looks like on the 8th and the 9th, how much is the moon changing each day? We notice that the moon is getting lighter on the right, and the shaded part on the left is growing smaller. So when we look at that, then we kind of fill in the blank, and we guess that it would be about a first quarter moon, half and half, on the 11th. And if we think about it growing even larger, then that still makes sense when we look at the 14th, the first day that was given to us after this quarter moon that we've drawn in. The second method that we talked about using was trying to find similar pictures on Emily's moon observations as we see on our internet page. So if we look at our calendar of the moon phases on stardate.org, and we look for moon pictures that match ones that we have on Emily's calendar, if we look in particular at the 8th and the 9th, see what looks to be a waxing crescent moon. And so if we look at our picture here on stardate, we can see the same waxing crescent moon somewhere on the 17th to 18th. And so if we use those dates to mark where we're looking here, and we say that we need to know what the moon will look like 2 days after that, then when we come back to our calendar, we start on the 18th and we count 2 days, 1, 2, the 20th is what our moon will look like. So that does look like a first quarter moon, so that backs up the method that we used, number 1, of trying to recognize patterns. We also had an interesting thought today from Tony. He noticed that if you look every 2 weeks, there seems to be an opposite moon phase. So he noticed that if you look, for an example, at the full moon, 2 weeks before that, you would see a new moon. So that was an interesting observation that he made. He also went further to say that you could even look at the other moon phases, and that in essence, every 2 weeks, if you took the pieces of the moon, say on the 8th and the 22nd, and you put them together, you would have a whole moon. The part of the moon that's lit up, if you piece them together, you would have a whole moon. That's an interesting thought. And if you look at this calendar, for the most part, he would be right. Now, there are occasional instances where that's going to be a little different, a little off. And again, that plays out because of the different days of the month. So for an example, if you look at our 18th of May and you look 2 weeks from that date, you'll notice that on the 1st, it's not the exact opposite. So that's a little interesting. But for the most part, that seems to be a method that could also work to help us get to a good place as far as guessing an approximation of what the moon's appearances would look like. One thing we mentioned in class that we definitely should not do is just to look at the date. So for example, the 11th, and then look back at the 11th on this calendar and just draw the same moon, because it does not work. And as we mentioned in class today, that's because some months have 30 days, some have 31, some have 28. Every 4 years we have one that has 29. So that can throw off when the date would be used for predicting the moon phases. So with that information in mind, then, we went through in class and filled in the 11th and the 22nd. We talked about using patterns, and then we double-checked those patterns by counting days past given phases that match up. So the 18th was a full moon. We look back, we find that on the 30th it looks to be a full moon as well. So we counted 4 days past that and drew in the same moon phase shape for the 22nd. So using those methods, I'd like for you to pause this video right now and try to draw in the 28th. Okay, so if you look carefully at the patterns, you notice that the dark shadow of the moon is on the left, and between the 22nd and the 25th, it is growing larger. So if we try to cast out what it might look like 3 days beyond the 25th, you might say that it's going to look a little something like either a last quarter moon where half the moon is dark. Sorry, trying to use the computer mouse is a little challenging. I'm sure you feel my pain. Or you might notice that, or you might have guessed that the phase is a bit more gibbous in nature. Something like that. Thinking that, by the time 3 days has elapsed, it will have gone past the quarter moon phase and is starting into that gibbous moon phase. And we can double check ourselves using the same method that we did above. So we find this moon shape on the 25th on our calendar here. And I would argue that that's somewhere in the ballpark of the 4th. And so if we go from the 4th, we would need to go 1, 2, 3 days. So going back to our calendar, we would go 1, 2, 3 days. You see it actually does look like it is a last quarter moon. If you felt like the 5th was where it began, then the 8th actually comes pretty close to what I have drawn in there. In this case, because we're a little loose on our predictions, either answer would be acceptable. So if you drew in a gibbous moon or if you drew in the last quarter moon, I would say that you are spot on with predicting the moon phases at this point. So then back to our procedure steps. It wants us to predict the date for the next full moon in the June calendar, student sheet 79.2. We can do that one of two ways. Again, the same method that we've just been using. So down here on the June calendar, we see we've got this moon shape on the 1st. Now, predicting where the full moon is going to be is a little bit challenging here because it is so far away from the 1st here. So we might want to start with our second method of just counting on the calendar, trying to match the phase of the 1st up with one that we see on our lunar cycle. So if we do that, we would say that the 11th is probably the moon phase that fits best. And so to get to the full moon, which is listed on this computer as being the 29th, I just count days. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 days till I get to the full moon. So I jump over to my calendar. This is my starting point. So I say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 days puts me on the 19th. So I would draw in my full moon here on the 19th. I would accept any answer between the 18th and the 20th as your full moons. Back in your procedure steps, it asks you then to draw in when the new moon would occur. In this case, Tony's method actually works out pretty nicely for us. Noticing that it is 2 weeks between full moon and new moon, we might be able to just mark that on the 5th, we have a new moon. Again, if yours was the 18th, then you would mark that the 4th was the new moon, and if you said that your full moon was on the 20th, then the 6th would be the new moon. Any of those would be acceptable for today. We're just going to call the new moon somewhere between the 4th and the 5th, and we'll say that our full moon falls either on the 18th or the 19th. So, with that information in mind, at this point, I hope you understand how we are beginning to make predictions of what the moon phase will look like, and you at this point should be able to make sense of these challenge questions. In analysis question number 1, it wants to explain how we made our predictions for procedure steps 6 and 7. Basically, we used one of two methods, either looking for a pattern and trying to continue that pattern and just drawing that shape, or finding a matching moon phase on our lunar cycle and counting the days to get to the day we need to draw. In number 2, it says in 2004 there was a full moon on May 4th. In 2005 there was a full moon on May 23rd. Why doesn't the full moon fall on the same day every year? It's as we discussed in class that the months don't have the same amount of days, and so from one year to the next, it's not going to be the same day that the moon phase falls on. Now for questions 3 and 4 and 5, I want you to pause the video after each question that's read so that you can try to answer these questions and then check them by watching the rest of the video. So number 3 says, predict the date of the next first quarter moon for the June calendar on student sheet 79.2. Explain how you made your prediction. Pause this video now and see what answer you come up with. So if you have done this correctly, you'll notice that it's 2 weeks from new moon to full moon. And if you happen to notice, between that new moon and the full moon, we get a first quarter moon. It falls about 7 days between the two. So what you should have down somewhere here on the 11th or the 12th is your first quarter moon, because 7 days after a new moon, according to our calendar, if we look here as the new moon, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days on this calendar puts us at a first quarter moon. If we use the 13th as our new moon, then that puts us at 7. So somewhere here in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 date, or realistically anywhere that you drew in the first quarter moon between the 11th and the 12th would be acceptable. Your first quarter moon should be light on the right and dark on the left. Something like this. Beautiful. So again, anywhere on the 10th, 11th, or 12th. Next question. Good job, by the way, if you got that right. Summarize the complete cycle of the moon's phases in words and with a labeled diagram. This is a lot easier than it sounds. This is a lunar cycle. It's a 30-day lunar cycle. We want to simplify this. We don't need to have 15 different crescent pictures and 15 different gibbous pictures. Let's just pick out the main phases. So basically what I want you to do there is draw a cycle. It starts with either a new moon or a full moon, goes through each of the phase types and comes back. And that takes care of number 4. So I'm not going to show you a picture of that because realistically you can see a picture of all of those things here. Just make sure, start at new moon and make the moon grow, then grow smaller. Make it wax, then make it wane. That's number 4. And then number 5, about how many days does it take a complete cycle of the moon's phases to take? Based on your data, you should find that it takes somewhere between 28 and 30 days for the lunar cycle to repeat. So hopefully this helped you. If not, make sure you see me in class. See you soon.